new friends joining us. Today's session is the second of 3 offerings this year, and our series this year is entitled Building from Strengths, Children, Families, and Communities in Pandemic Times. And we felt like this was a really important lens for us as we're considering children, families, and schools right now, because we view this new school year as an opportunity to focus not on what has been lost during the pandemic years, but on what we have discovered about learning and community and the strengths and resilience of children, families, and teachers. Our next and final session this spring will focus on children's relationships with the natural world. All of our sessions this year will continue to be virtual, and your registration today ensures that you will receive an email announcement when registration for the next events is available, and you'll also receive certificates of participation for professional development hours because of your registration. Before we get started with our really exciting program this evening, I just want to check in about a few Zoom norms. Please, if you're not speaking, if you could keep your sound off. We are recording this evening because there are a lot of people who wanted to access the recording because they weren't able to attend tonight. So if you're not comfortable having your face or voice recorded, please turn off your camera. Please enter any questions that you have into the chat so that we can field those for our speakers. And then also we have enabled closed captioning for the presentations this evening, so you can access that independently should you wish to use it. And so I'd like to move into our panel this evening and just talking a little bit about what we're going to be hearing and why it's so important. Our panel this evening is Learning to Let Grow: How Teachers and Families Can Support Children's Independence. And as a teacher of young children, I feel like this is just one of the most important topics that we can be exploring. You know, what does it mean to give children independence, to give children agency? Our speakers this evening are Lenore Skenazy, president of Let Grow, founder of the Free Range Kids Movement; Maggie Van Camp, the research associate at the Cell to Society Lab, Boston College School of Social Work; and Lisa Fiore, professor and chair of the education department at Lesely University. And just to tell you a little bit about what you're going to be hearing tonight, teachers and parents of young children often wrestle with competing responsibilities and instincts as they celebrate children's developmental milestones and monitor environmental threats, real and imagined. In this session, panelists will share examples of classroom curriculum associated with the Let Grow project. Teachers and families' reflections and students' experiences and artifacts will lay the foundations for an interactive exchange with participants so that everyone can consider the potential growth in their own educational settings. And as a teacher who's constantly faced with, should I watch the children? Should I stop them? Should I let this happen? And then the reality that often when you let that happen, that's when the most powerful learning occurs. I'm so excited to hear everything that you have to say. And I feel like the work that's being done is something that unleashes a lot of children's agency, capability, and creativity that we tend to shut down as we think of protecting them. So without further ado, I want to have a warm welcome to our speakers, and I'll turn it over to them to share some introductions and the flow of this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Great. So hello, everybody. I'm Lisa Fiore, as Dana said. Thank you. I don't think I need to share any more by way of introduction, other than I'll say that I also direct the child homelessness initiative at Lesely, which I'm very proud of, and it's one of the well-kept, but we don't want it to be kept secrets at Lesely. So happy to share that information. I'm mentioning my Zoom background because Lenore happens to live in New York, and I went to preschool and kindergarten at the 92nd Street Y, which is behind me. And it was absolutely one of the reasons I think I love early childhood education so much. I had such a wonderful experience, and I can still smell the cologne of the elevator operator who I would hug every day when I went into the building. But at any rate, I will share my screen in a moment, but I first want to give Maggie and Lenore an opportunity to say anything more they'd like to share about themselves.
Let's have Maggie go first.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all here. My name is Maggie Van Camp, and I am a researcher from Boston College School of Social Work. I'm a recent graduate from Lesely, so some of you look so familiar because I just finished my dissertation looking at children's play and executive functioning here with Lisa as my advisor. And in the past, I've worked in the public schools as a kindergarten teacher and curriculum coordinator and ECE accreditation mentor in the public school system.
Wow. I didn't know she was your teacher or your professor
Yes,
or God.
I did know
whatever
that.
she was. That's very
I think
cool.
at some point it must have come up, Lenore, but yes.
You know, whatever. It's hard to remember anything, including like, help, where's my Zoom invite? The worst moment of my
That's
day,
okay.
every day. Send it to me now. So I'm Lenore, slightly losing my mind, but nonetheless here to talk to you about childhood independence. And I'll just give you the briefest of backgrounds, which is that when our younger son was 9 years old, which is a long time ago already because he's 24, he started asking me and my husband if we would take him someplace he'd never been before and let him find his own way home by subway. That was his dearest dream. Somebody's nodding along. Romana, you're the only person who remembers it. Good. So one sunny Sunday, I took him to Bloomingdale's because that's the place he hadn't been before because I shop thrift. And I left him in the handbag department, partly because it sounded funny, but mostly because it's right above the subway entrance. There's a subway right under Bloomingdale's, which perhaps Lisa remembers from her childhood. That's the same subway line up to 92nd Street. And sure enough, he went in the subway. He asked a stranger for directions. The stranger didn't kidnap him. The stranger told him to get on the other side of the tracks. He was on the wrong side, took the subway home, came into our apartment, levitating with pride. And I'm a newspaper reporter, and sometimes we have nothing to say. And so I was like, should I write about Izzy taking the subway? You know, some of the other moms are going to wait. The kids are like 34, 35. And so my editor said, sure, write it. So I wrote why I let my 9-year-old ride the subway alone. And 2 days later, I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR, defending myself. So that weekend, I started the blog Free Range Kids, and I've been saying this for 15 years. It's always the same thing, although I have a lot of slogans. But one of them is our children are safer and smarter than our culture gives them credit for. And I would say also stronger. And I'm not a hard ass. I'm not saying, you know, you should eat brass tacks and that'll make you strong. I just feel like we are undermining them with our belief that they can't handle anything and that we should always be with them and helping them because, you know, at some point, it's nice to see what they can do with each other, with themselves. So about 10 years into Free Range Kids, traveled all around the country and world saying the same exact thing. 2 people came to me and one of them was, should I be rattling on like this? It's like everybody else gave their short intros. Do you care? It's like, I'll just, yes, no.
It's great. Keep talking.
Okay. All right. So sorry. I sure will. You're going to regret it. So about 5 years ago, a guy named Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, everyone thinks his name is Haidt. He's the guy who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind, if you've heard of that. And he also wrote The Righteous Mind. He was talking to a guy named Dan Schuckman, who was head of something called FIRE back then, Fights for Free Speech on Campus, Diversity of Viewpoints, the open-minded liberal world. And they were saying that there's something weird with like kids seem fragile on campus, you know, more thrown off by minor things than maybe other generations had been, less open, you know, more, like sort of closed off and mistaking feeling uncomfortable for literally feeling unsafe. And they said this can't just be happening when they turn 18, not like a birthday present. So who is dealing with this at a younger age, trying to make sure that kids grow up sort of resilient, can do, confident, competent? And so they came to me and they said, let's start a nonprofit. And I said, speaking of can do, I said, no. I said, are you kidding? I don't know how to run anything. I'm a reporter. And they said, well, why don't you find somebody? And so I found somebody. And together we all started a group called Let Grow. But before we did, I said, you got to bring in one more founder, and that's Peter Gray. And I'll bet a lot of you have heard of Peter Gray. I love Peter Gray. So if you've read Peter Gray, you can leave and go cook dinner because everything I say is what Peter Gray says, except in my body. So so we founded Let Grow, and the difference between Let Grow and Free Range Kids is that Free Range Kids, I went around and everybody would nod along. Oh, yes, I love my childhood. Oh, yes, this was great. I love doing it. Playing in the woods, streetlights came on, ride my bikes, blah, blah, blah. But they couldn't make the leap to actually giving that to their own kids, even though they remembered this as the sweetest part of their own childhood. And so I said, we can't just deal with people nodding along. We really have to change behavior, because you guys are teachers, you know, the behavior makes the change. And you sort of have to have the behavior before you realize, oh, that behavior is good. So our job at Let Grow is to make it easy, normal, and legal to give kids back the best part of childhood, the freedom and the free play.
Great. So I will share my screen, and just to give all of you, we're all together in this informal conversational moment, whatever cafe we can picture ourselves sitting around, whether it's, I don't know, does Sarah Beth still exist in that area? Whatever, someplace
Yes.
we're grabbing a cup of coffee and a pastry.
And overpriced jelly, we're there.
So that's the spirit of this. While we do have slides to help guide the conversation, this will be an opportunity to share with each other as well. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and Maggie and Lenore, just give me a nudge appropriately when you would like me to share slides. So here we are with specific images chosen because perhaps they reflect some things that people have concerns about, like, a child walking alone in the wide world and cooking over heat and using real tools, not plastic tools. So here's our agenda. And also just a reminder, since I'm sharing my screen, I am not seeing chat. I can see obviously if something occurs in chat, but if someone types something in the chat that is important, please interrupt me, certainly, but others as well. We'll be gracious and pace ourselves accordingly, but we will have time at the end, as you can see, for a larger Q&A. So this connects to what Lenore was saying before, and this is a question from what Lenore has shared with Maggie and me, that, this question comes up often in groups when Lenore is speaking. What's one thing that you love to do as a child that you don't see children doing anymore? So this is an opportunity to test out the chat. And please take a moment, and if you're so moved, what is something that you love to do that you've noticed you don't see children doing anymore these days?
Oh, I want to see what people say.
If you click the chat.
Yeah.
Top.
I'm clicking. Okay. Play alone with friends. Yep. Make our own fun. We can leave. That's like exactly what I wanted to hear. Being alone in the woods. Yeah. It's poignant. Not sure about the railroad tracks. Okay. Unstructured time. Yeah. All right.
And if anyone would prefer to come off mic and share, please feel free to shout out as well.
Then I'm going to shout out. May I? So it's weird to just be watching and not talking. Michelle, riding bikes without adults watching, roller skating by myself. What's the theme here? Right? Anybody? What would it have been different if your mom had come riding bikes with you? Yeah, and they're outside, or roller skating with you, which would have been an attraction. Let's just think about how different that is. If, did anybody have their mom coming along with them? And if not, what difference did it make that they weren't there? I mean, it's pretty didactic for people who are teachers, but I just want to sort of get the words out there. What's different about, what was good about not having adults with you? How about that?
I guess we were forced to make our own decisions about things.
Like what?
And support of, I don't know, should we go into the woods even further, or what time, should we all head home, or I don't know if we should do this. What do you think? Supporting on, relying on friends.
I think also just having the freedom to learn our own limits, to know how far we can go before we've pushed ourselves too far, to learn the level of challenge that we can challenge ourselves, right? Whereas mom might be low, oh no, that hill is too steep. No, get off your bike, or, all the precaution.
Right. Or I'll help you. I'll help you roll down the hill. Yeah. So what else? I mean, this is talking about two things at once. I think one is independence and one is free play. So let's just think for a second about the independence part of it. What was good about it? I mean, yes, you learned your limits, you made decisions. What else? What did you get from thinking on your own and being on your own? Like something that you carry to this day.
I think there's this inherent responsibility that comes with it, that my grownups believe that I'm capable of this. So maybe I'd better learn to be capable of this.
But maybe I better learn to be responsible and worthy of their trust. Yeah. The other day I was interviewing these 16, 17-year-olds who were normal high school students, actually wonderful high school students. And they were all being tracked by their parents on like Life 360 or Find My iPhone. Jennifer's nodding. And there were a lot of poignant moments, but one of them was this kid saying, you know, how can I prove to my mom that I wasn't going to go to that party? I said I wasn't going to go to that party, and I didn't go to that party, but I didn't go because I'm responsible, not because I thought that she was, you know, because she was watching me. How do you even, you know, it's a big deal, Dana, I was saying, to prove that you are growing up and worthy of respect and trust. And there's no trust if you're tracked. I mean, it's like with Russia, you know, trust but verified. There's no trust. You didn't trust Russia. That's why we're always verifying. But if you're always verifying your kids, how are they supposed to know that you trust them? I have no idea. I think the tracking is pretty worrisome. But okay, so you're alone and you're worthy of trust. What else is cool about being by yourself? Anything that went wrong anytime when you were playing with your friends or off by yourself and something happened that we can talk about now? That's not so horrible that it will disprove my whole point. Riding my bike. Yeah, she enjoyed the independence, of course. All right, so I'll tell you, there's lots of stuff going on over here. So I'll tell you a quick little story, which was that I was actually talking to a group of educators and I asked them what went wrong sometime when they were alone. And one of the women said, well, she was riding down this really steep hill, or it seems steep when you're 7 or 8, whatever, covered with pine needles. So very slick, and racing down to the bottom. And she was just at the bottom where you have to, like, you know, she slammed on her brakes, she squeezed the brakes and the handlebars came off her bike. And she had like a split second and she threw herself into the bushes. And then, I guess not to be outdone, one of the guy teachers talked about a time when he had been on a hike with a buddy and a bunch of parents and a bunch of kids, and he and his buddy got lost, and without telling anybody, they hitchhiked back. And then another guy talked about a time he'd played Mumbly Peg, which is such a stupid game where you throw a knife at somebody's feet. And of course, one of them stuck in a foot, and the kids all sort of surrounded the boy and brought him inside. Oh, everything's fine, you know, and up the stairs and put him in the shower and put on the Band-Aid. Oh no, we're just coming down for a snack. And when I asked them, why were you hiding this? Why didn't you tell your parents this? What do you think they said? People have to be unmuted. Just talk to me, right? What do you think?
They didn't want to get in trouble.
I didn't want to get in trouble. And I didn't want I didn't want to take it away. I didn't want my parents to take away my freedom. And if they knew that I was being a little irresponsible, or that things were a teeny bit dangerous or minor risks, or I screwed up sometimes, you know, they valued their freedom that much that they were willing to sort of suck it up and figure out how to solve the problem on their own, and then go back to being brave and independent, as opposed to getting in trouble, but also perhaps having those boundaries that somebody was talking about, constricted a little bit. And I just wish that parents were thinking about that when they're setting the limits for their own kids, with like, I'll be with you, I'll watch you, I'll track you, I'll drive you. There's something very different about that. And Peter Gray says, the first one, I should just like give him a nickel. But Peter Gray talks about how there's this drive to play in kids, right? And Mother Nature put it in there, knowing that the drive to have fun at the end would mean that kids were willing to do all the tough stuff in between to get to the fun, the negotiating, the taking a little risk, being a little scared, compromising, being frustrated, arguing, all these really important interpersonal skills that are no fun to develop except when they're in the service of something great, which is, having fun with your buddies. And so when adults are with kids and they see them arguing, it's like, oh, stop arguing, I'll make the teams. Or, you need to know, all right, this is going to be first base, second base, third base. Or, it's time to start the game already, because the parents know how to start the game because they're adults. right? That was the subway rider, just went back. Now he's 24 and has COVID. So I don't know if that proves about me. Anyways, so when we are with our kids as teachers or as parents, and we are trying to help them have fun already, it's sort of like taking the whole wheat out of the wheat germ out of the wheat and saying like, no, I'll give you something fluffier and sweeter and lighter. And it's white bread. And it's like, but in the meantime, that the tougher, chewier fiber of childhood has been removed because we can, and we're there, and it pains us to see them wasting time or screwing up. So what I'm trying to do, and the reason I'm so happy that Peter Gray joined Let Grow, is trying to give kids back the independence, but also the mixed age free play off their devices, just with other kids, with an adult somewhere far in the background with an EpiPen, so that they get some of this richness of child development that happens to look like sometimes wasted time to adults, sometimes silly playing to adults, but Mother Nature had a plan. So that's it. You can tell me other things you did as kids and what you got from it. Or not. Maybe you're not there. Maybe all these people are just names. Yes.
My husband tells stories about his childhood house abutted woods, and he and his friends would just walk, and they would make pine needle tea, and they would climb through construction pipes. And when I hear that, I think, oh my God, you could have been stuck and trapped and no one would have known
and
how
poisoned.
To find you. Right. And died from whatever concoctions you were creating. But he didn't. And it's such a rich time that he reflects upon fondly. So whatever, I think it was not a choice that my in-laws said, oh, this is really good for the kids. They just didn't know.
Right. Or they trusted him. And also it was the social norm, right? Everybody sent their kids out to play. Nobody second guessed themselves. What I feel bad for today's parents is that, like when my mom was sending me out to walk to kindergarten, as everybody did back then, she wasn't thinking, oh my God, this is so scary, so terrible. Won't everybody else think I'm irresponsible? What if something happens? I'd never forgive myself. Think about Elizabeth Smart. It was, when the social norm says it's okay to have a tiny risk, but you can't get zero risk, that's a different era than when we are in now, when we're expecting parents to have such total control over their kids all day. And I think schools expect, the same level of control. You almost can't let go. And so I'm trying to re-normalize the idea that, first of all, you can't get perfect safety. And secondly, there's a huge upside to giving kids back this kind of independence that you're talking about with you and your husband and some of the other people here, which is, how you learn to get along. And, we're also obsessed with the social emotional learning that has been lost. It does sound like it's really severe in schools. I mean, you should tell me. I'm not in schools that much. And so what easier way to get that back than to give kids some independent time and some playtime? And also I'm wondering, could we make this back into like the big screen where we can see each other and bigger? Because we already know the question.
We can, if I can switch back now and stop sharing, and then we can move back when we want to share the video. Would that work?
I would like that better because everybody's so small and my eyes are getting.
What I think is interesting too, Lenore, about social emotional learning, that's when I look at the answers that people just gave, that's kind of something that jumped out to me. Like, oh, a lot of people are talking about relationships. Yeah. They're talking about I was with my friends, or I felt like confident. And I noticed actually a lot of these memories have to do with wheels, roller skating, bike riding. So when you first asked a minute ago, what is standing out to you? And I'm like, wheels. Everyone's on wheels in their memories for this. So I think maybe what's really memorable from our childhoods are relationships, because I think that's one of the things that carries the biggest weight for us in a lot of ways throughout our lifetimes, especially for young children, our relationships, but also the idea about wheels, like you're going fast, it's a little bit dangerous, right? So I think that's kind of scary and exciting, and it might not be super dangerous. Maybe it's just a little risky depending on where you are. I mean, if you're going through sewers and drinking pine needle tea, you're like adding on layers of risk. But if you're in a suburban town with cul-de-sacs, maybe the risk is less that your scooter might get a broken wheel, or you need to figure out, you pop the tire on your bike, all these kind of things that can happen. And it's kind of like, well, I figured it out. It's great preparation sort of for adulthood, because I can tell you the other night, I turned onto the highway out in New Hampshire and it's dark, and I hit a pothole and I broke the axle on my car. Right.
God.
So if I'd never had an experience with a car having a problem, or maybe my bike when I was a kid, or on a scooter, maybe I would have been really scared and not know what to do. But, luckily you can kind of build up experiences and be able to figure out kind of later on. So it's important to note that maybe some of these things might seem kind of small, these little memories, but maybe they're going to have a bigger impact later as kids grow up and kind of need to actually be independent themselves.
I think you guys are the early childhood educators. Tell me experiences you've seen when you've like wanted to jump in, but you stayed back for like a minute and just saw something happen. I mean, if there's any memory like that, tell me, because everything I say is stolen from someone else, and I would like some new stories to tell. So if you have one, share it. Oh, I thought Pebble was going to say something. No?
Well, I was just thinking about my own self as a child. And of course, that was quite a while ago. But I gave the example of roller skating in my neighborhood. I grew up in New York City, not far from the 92nd Street Y, as it turns out.
Cool.
But I think also
should have hung on to that apartment.
There's an excitement and also a sensory element that I remember from that experience. And I think when I was alone, or when I was the initiator of going outside, putting on those old roller skates that were made of metal, and feeling the sidewalk under my feet and being in danger of scraping my knees and having to maneuver over the streets and cars, there was an excitement, but there's also a vividness and a sensory richness, I think, that children have when they do something on their own, when they're not there with a parent who's watching them or an older sibling who's watching them. There's something about the quality of the experience itself, which is just so vitally nurturing to the person, to the self, to the individual. So I think that's part of it too.
That reminds me, first of all, how cool. Secondly, I would never be brave enough to roller skate on the streets of New York City. So kudos to you. Yeah. But also it's like, so you think about, the way I think about it is like when you're the driver and you're talking about sort of being in the driver's seat of your life, you're paying attention and, oh, there's the landmark and watch out for that. And it sounds like my axle is, being ruined. It's different from being the passenger. And I know that for a fact because I'm always the passenger because I'm terrified to drive. Now you know. And so whenever anyone picks me up from the airport, I don't know how to get home from the airport. Other people know how to get home from the airport because I'm always the passenger. And I feel like, it's sort of metaphoric that kids are the passengers in their lives now because we literally drive them places. And also we say, here, let me do that for you. And I have a friend who's a professor of psychology at Long Island University, Camilo Ortiz. And when he has, families coming in with their kids have some kind of problem, he puts them in a room with toys and a two-way mirror. And then he obviously stands behind the mirror and he watches and listens to how many times the parents are telling their kids what to do. Oh, here, why don't you use these blocks? These are better. Make a tower. Oh, that's not going to work. Oh, that's about to tip over. Here, I think it's supposed to look nice. Oh, honey, don't touch that. That's dirty. And he clicks. How many times, like anytime they say something, and I find it hard to believe, but he's told this story many times to the point where I guess it's true, that sometimes in 30 minutes, the adults will talk to their kids, will issue 100 orders. Do it this way. That's great. High five. Try it now. And there's something that's not only unhelpful, it's worse than unhelpful. It totally, like if you're talking about flow or figuring things out or thinking, I mean, it's a distraction. It's like this nattering at you. And parents, and I don't know, maybe also teachers are doing this because they do have a better idea and they're creative too. And they remember building towers and that is going to fall over. But, you've been 3 before. They haven't. Let them get from 3 to 4, figuring out all the stuff on the way. And once in a while you can say, that's going to come. I was right. That came crashing to the ground. You were right. Big deal. Let them figure it out so that they can be the person who knows that much the next time. And in terms of wheels, Maggie, wheels are freedom, right? I mean, everybody's trying to get someplace further than they could get on their feet. That's also a basic childhood drive that I'd like to, I mean, like really, I'm nattering on, and I feel like I have this treasure trove of people who work with actual children. Tell me about the drive to play and the drive to explore. I mean, wow me with some stories of things that have really impressed you when you have stood back and witnessed this. It should be pretty cool. If anybody has a story for me.
Well, this happened a few weeks ago. Playing with sticks. I don't know others who are in the classroom. I feel like playing with sticks is like the eternal, don't let them do it. No, they love the sticks. It's just, so there was this epic stick, this huge stick. And we, my pre-K class has their own sort of playground space, but it's right on the street in Cambridge. So it's gated in, but it's very much, we're under surveillance by the whole neighborhood. And the neighborhood often feels free to make comments on how we're dealing with kids. So one of the kids picks up this absolutely massive stick, and there are 32 kids outside, and he starts rotating with this. And I'm taking those deep breaths and stepping back and trying not to jump in and stop him. And while I'm watching neighbors peer out, and he stops and he says, guys, it's too heavy and I can't see. Can you guys come help? And suddenly kids come from various parts of the playground and they start holding it. And they, as a group, and there must have been at least 6 or 7 kids on this stick, they figure out how to navigate it, move it all the way across the playground, and then orient it so it can lean up against a wall. And they're talking to each other and they're being careful of, there are also tricycles going by and just all of these, but they move all the way across the playground and they prop it up against a wall and they say, it's a fort. And suddenly all of these, and I kept thinking about what would have happened if I had said, put the big stick down. And if I'd listened to all of those people around me who I knew were thinking, why is she letting them pick up the big stick? So for me, it's a lot less about wheels and more about sticks, I guess.
Wait, are we recording this recording, right? Right?
Yes.
Okay. So Dana, you just have to give me like a thumbs up, and I'm just going to cut that into a little video because it's so great. I mean, that's a perfect example of like, I'm wiser. I see that this is a danger. I've got a suggestion, and then watching. So it looked like Patricia might have had a story.
Yeah, I'm just about to break into a story about sticks, so I'm right on Dana's.
Let's hear it. Like, this could be the stick forum.
Although there were actually branches, at our local, the school that I teach at in Jamaica Plain has we go to neighborhood parks, and there, after a storm one day, there were several branches that had come down, and we discovered those. And it was one of those moments where I thought, do I, do I, don't I? And we thought, we have a sort of a policy of why not? So we decided we let it play. And they're pretty massive branches, but I had a 3-year-old who dragged it across the playground on her own, looking extremely proud of herself. And then sort of similarly, a group of kids got together and were partying it around as a team, and watching them have to sort of talk to each other and navigate space and around other people was a lesson in just this amazing collaboration and problem solving stuff that we were merely watching. The adults were not involved in any way, but I could see how much the children were getting out of that ability to. And I think this thing about the enormity of the stick, which was extremely, that signifies power and strength, was very attractive to them. So I think allowing that extra excitement over the very big stick was especially a good decision to make.
That's so cool. So the big stick is sort of like the power equivalent of the wheels, which is to go.
I would say if Ben Mardell was here, wouldn't he say that kids playing with sticks would be more like a ballet than a battle? Because for some reason, it's like an exercise. When I look at kids playing with sticks, they almost hit each other often. Sometimes, of course, they might actually have a collision, but they often almost hit each other. It's like an exercise in spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination. It's like this fantastic, natural, physical activity of exercise and excitement. And I think, Patricia, you said it perfectly. It's this concept of power. Like, am I the good guy right now? Or am I going to be the bad guy right now in this kind of story that we're playing in a way? So I think kids with sticks is probably one of the most interesting kind of like risky play that we see. And it is often discouraged. And I think, you would have to sort of, in the context of which you're working and knowing your student population, whether or not it would be an appropriate thing. But I think it's a fascinating thing to observe, especially kids who have the opportunity to use sticks and to explore what's it like to hold a big stick or a small stick, and how does that move around my body, and like how much space do I need around me if I have this big stick. They're really trying to figure it out, like an investigation in a way. And of course, it doesn't look very organized because they're small and it might be kind of, unbalanced, but it really is, from a developmental standpoint, sticks are an excellent thing to look at in terms of early childhood. So I'm excited to hear a couple of stick stories. Does anybody else have another one?
Or wheels?
Or wheels.
I actually wanted to switch gears a bit and talk about climbing.
Ah,
Because for me, in my experience as both a mother who allows her children to climb trees, much to the chagrin of many of the parents at the park, but also a teacher who kind of, I can't remember, Patricia, I think you said a policy called "Why Not?" I absolutely love it.
that. Yeah.
So I kind of adopted that policy on my own when I was on my own on the playground. Like, why not let them sit on the monkey bars? How many times has a child broken a limb by falling off when if they have daily practice climbing those monkey bars and getting across them? How different is it to situate themselves on top? So I kind of wanted to talk about climbing a little bit and see if anything
and recognizing some competence. It's like we can't pretend like they can't sit there when we see that they actually can. I mean, there was a policy at the school of no sitting on the monkey bar. Or like, what are you supposed to do on the monkey bars? Avoid them?
You could climb across them, underneath them, but climbing up on top of them and going
actual
across
mastery
from the top was not allowed.
Boy, we really like to undermine development, not to mention the human spirit. Wow. So who was talking about the policy of why not? Was it Pebble? Who was the why not?
Patricia was talking about that.
So talk about that. I mean, that's really interesting to me. Is it like a stated policy, or is it just sort of?
Well, it's just something that we talk about as teachers. I wouldn't say that it is stated or written any place, but it's something we've talked about just in sort of informally together. We have a teacher of our youngest preschool class. In fact, now that I think about it, she has an absolute sort of why not policy. And the other day I walked into the classroom and she was letting the children jump off of so they were climbing around this sort of pretend castles set up. And they learned that they could actually step from there onto the top of a shelf, and standing on furniture, one of those things that, up and down with okay, not okay. But she was allowing them to do this and then to jump off of it onto the rug area, because they asked if they could do that. And she said, for one day, we're gonna try this out and see what it's like. And she even let one of the kids catch another child. I mean, just sort of this level of sort of, really, it's about trusting the children to have some ability to sort of just to be competent, honestly, and to take a little bit of care. And that's exactly what was happening. I watched child after child climb onto a shelf and jump off onto a rug, and there was not any little bit of an injury or hurt or anything. It was just all triumph and pride. So it was a good choice for her, and then when it's done and we're going to move on to something else, she's pretty clear about this is going to be over now because now we're doing the other thing. But I've seen the children in the school allowed to take risks with jumping, climbing, stick with which is, in a across the board, knowing that that's a value. Actually, they also get to play when it's raining. We let them play at the skateboard park because they go sliding down the ramps over there, which is the most amazing thing to see.
On skateboards or just?
No, just in their rain gear. The surfaces get so slippery and slick that it's a fantastic slide. So They run around the top of it and then they go sliding down into the center and then back up again. Yeah, that's also a pretty wonderful.
Wow. It's like you're letting the animals back into the wild.
Yes.
You know, like I'm
So
going to release you.
we have a great location with a lot of different neat play spaces or outdoor play spaces, and the teachers across the board seem really comfortable allowing the children to explore. Yeah, beyond what I've experienced in other schools I've spent time at. So it's refreshing.
Can I ask you guys, and I realize this is supposed to be me teaching you, but I have to learn, what are the rules? Like, how bad are the rules at the schools? Like, are they crazy or are they not crazy? I see Cindy.
You should unmute. Cindy had a great comment in here about the licensors who would insist on not being on top of the monkey bars and just the obstacles that teachers face. Cindy, do you want to add anything about that?
It's listening to this workshop. It's almost like it's wonderful for parents because parents can choose to make some of those risky decisions themselves. In childcare, anyway, maybe not public school, but childcare, it's so regulated that there almost anything we're discussing really cannot be allowed. And to do it, you almost have to circumvent or find a creative way to allow for risk taking, allow for tree climbing, allow for sticks by looking the other way. You know, you can't, it's just, you know, read the state regulations sometime and you'd just be appalled at what, you know, not only do we have administration or parent boards or, you know, like licensors, there's just so many layers of people who don't trust teachers. So how can teachers turn around and trust children?
Wow. You know, I go on.
I was once at a school where that licensor had come through and told them they couldn't let the kids swing on their stomachs.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine.
Yeah, because of what?
Because that's not how it's designed.
It's how
There's no explanation
designed.
for why. I think head injuries.
Yeah. Stomach injuries.
There's a comment in the chat that I just wanted to read aloud. Even sometimes having to explain to other teachers that some of our older kids need risk to get the rewarding experience at parks, like climbing up slides or using equipment in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, who wants to live with little, you know, rigid rule followers who have never climbed up the slide? You know, it's really, it does boil down to trust. You have to trust kids. You have to trust Mother Nature. You have to trust resilience. When they're running around with sticks, you have to trust that the ballet will, you know, generally triumph over battles and understand that if somebody does fall, it's not because you're this negligent, terrible teacher. It's because kids fall when they're playing. And when did that become a federal crime? It's, you know, if you ask me, like my whole movement, Free Range Kids, Let Grow, it's all about trust. Being allowed to trust parents to make decisions for their kids. It's trusting strangers, trusting kids around each other, trusting that they're going to get something out of time when you're not teaching them or when we're not hovering, that they're going to, you know, just playing is not a stupid waste of time. You know, a lot of the culture right now is devoted to making sure that anytime that a kid is alive, they should be having information, teachable moments, and to try to, you know, shoved at them because that way they'll get fuller faster and apparently succeed. And the idea that you could trust them to be curious on their own, trust them to figure some things out, even imperfectly. We're not allowed to do that. It's all so top down. And you guys, I would hope that because you're working with such young kids, at least free play was still recognized because they weren't, you know, they didn't have to write their college essays at age 6, right? I mean,
there's a dangerous term now called playful learning. To me, that's one of the
Peter hates that.
scariest terms in existence. And unfortunately, it's even at a place like Harvard, that's one of the Project Zero's pedagogy of play is a lot of that, you know, making things playful, but it's not play the way we've always, as a field, traditionally defined play. It's other
Right. It's like
education being masked in play.
right. That's like, we're going to play an educational game, and you never see the kids go, yeah. You
Yeah.
know, like an educational game, or we're going to play Twister. No, we're going to play an educational game. It'll be really fun. You just have to name the state capitals backwards while standing on a leg. Isn't that fun? Yeah.
Well, do you want to hear from some kids, Lenore? Do you want to show one of the videos? We have the.
Yeah. So thank you. I was like prompt. So there's two videos that I have here. One is just, I think the first one should be the reimagining. Yeah. Recess, because it's exactly what we're talking about. It's like, let kids loose with a lot of loose parts, junk, trees. And I guess, I don't want to make this playful learning either. Let's see how many interactions children are using in their social emotional skills. But you'll see that. You'll see that. We can talk about it afterwards. We don't have to there will be no quiz.
All right. I'm going to share my screen and hope technology.
This is 4 minutes, right? And it's a playground up in Ithaca, and I didn't make the video. I just love it.
All right.
Dun, dun, dun.
Children have more fun than they did last year. Or should I write it on? I'm wearing my hazmat suit. Alright. So, I'll just explain to you how many credits these are. That's a half a credit. These are 1 whole credit. This can count as how many credits you get, depending on what you shoot, like what you get.
Mommy, I got 110.
Nice, that's 11 more credits. So this is 0, this is 10, 20, 30, 50, and the whole last 100. And so, yeah, so you need to do a full ride on the turnstile if you want to have do a full like jump. Oh yeah, jumping a lot on these.
I'm like grade 29.
So, but wait, yeah. You can go to the gift shop that's over there, and where those kids are hanging out, and you can. You're limited to buying only 2 things right now, so you don't have to mix this up.
That's cool. I'll come back here tomorrow.
Okay.
Yay. I was going to ask you how many rules they violated there, how many inspectors would be on them so fast, but you tell me, is this possible in your, places where you work? I don't know if they're preschools or daycare centers or if they're called something else, but could you do something like that? Or perhaps you already do with just loose parts and kids playing? I need to know.
So I feel like I want to just bring this up. I teach in an independent school. So we have I feel like a very privileged approach toward play in that while we still have surveillance and people worrying, I'm allowed to make some of those rules because of it being an independent school space. And so we've grown a lot in that way. And the kids were able to develop, we created an outdoor classroom space that invited some of this kind of play at school. And I think I'm wondering a lot about knowing that the kids in my class have these opportunities, but that's not necessarily available to all children, and that I operate in this space of privilege that allows me to teach in a way that I want to. And then for whom is this accessible and for whom is it not? And how are we thinking about this kind of play and this really important risk taking in a larger sense for all children, and who gets to play in this way and who doesn't? I feel like it's something I just think about a lot as a teacher, and I wonder what you all think about as well.
It would be horrible if free play is a luxury reserved for the rich. I mean, that's just as dystopian as it gets, I'd say. But I don't know.
I would like to share that at my school, we don't have our own outside space of our own. So we do use public parks. We're lucky enough to have one. I don't know. It's like, it's across the street. So it's really, really close, but it is public land. So I think that we could still get away with doing things like this as long as we just took it with us, kind of.
Like bring the stuff over and then just bring it back when you're done.
Yeah, I think that would work. I really like that. I saw what interested me the most was that the kids kind of made their own swings in the sheets and the trees, because I can see, I have 4 and 5-year-olds. I think that they would go nuts for something like that. And it's funny because I didn't even think about using something like that. So we may actually try it in the future. But I also really liked that the little girl made the game and they incorporated so much math into it, as you heard, counting in tens.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't know that.
So they're not only like making their own games and, using their own numbers, but they're like linking physical activity with the counting. So, I mean, they don't even know, if you ask them, they'd be like, oh, I'm not doing math. I'm playing.
Right.
And that just goes back to, that just goes back to everything we've learned about how much they get from play. Where if you ask them, if mom and dad said at the end of the day, oh, I heard you did math today, they'd be like, what are you talking about? I ran a carnival today. So I thought that was really great.
Yeah, I agree. And I noticed some, language and literacy happening when they were writing tickets. I think no administrator would be unhappy that kids were doing some emergent writing while they were out in recess. So I think there may be barriers to doing a lot of exploration and free play depending on the context and setting that you work in, but there's always things that can be done. or having that mindset of what things can be done. Can we go out into the forest maybe and do language and literacy lessons? Is that a possibility? How would that change what it is that it feels like, or what's happening, or what we're learning about if we have that outside freedom, you know? So I think even when I worked in a public school, it was very restrictive, and I did have to feel like creative for like, how can I allow kids to have experiences that are rich and meaningful and like authentic to them? And that kind of happens during free play. So I think this reality, and I see Anne's comment in the chat as well, about feeling like it's a liability, feeling that, you know, it's tricky balance of trying to figure out, what can I do as a teacher? What can I do as what I know to be right in terms of child development? So I think actually seeing inspiration like this is good, but it might be on one end of the spectrum in terms of free play and possibilities, like dealing with regulations. But there are, you know, actually Lenore's programs, the LECRO project and the Play Club, are designed to be used in schools and in contexts where there are regulations and start and end times and adult supervision and, you know, very regulated situations. So I think it might be interesting to start explaining what the Play Club is.
Thank you.
How it can be used,
Right.
and then maybe what is the LECRO project and how that can be actually relevant. And I have to say, I haven't really seen Play Club and LECRO happen in specifically in the context of early childhood centers, but I see a possibility for it being in that space with these ages. So some of what we might talk about is a little bit elementary age group, but I think a lot of it is transferable to the younger kiddos for the teachers that we have here tonight.
Would it be okay if I jump in here?
Yeah.
My name is Claire. I teach at a preschool here in the Boston area. And I totally hear everyone on the regulation piece. It's really tricky. And one way we've kind of worked with that I think could be useful for other teachers in this field is show evidence of what you've done to teach your children the skills around handling a giant stick or around climbing a slide. If you show evidence that the children are capable because we have given them explicit presentation of how to climb the slide, where should you wait? How many children on the slide at one time? Should we climb using our hands, using not our hands, and giving children explicit lessons and then show evidence of that lesson. And if a regulator comes and says, oh, I noticed your child's climbing slides, and you can hand them the documentation to say, yep, and we've given 32 children this presentation.
Slide climbing presentation.
And they know
PowerPoint.
slide climbing. And sometimes slide climbing is on and children are available to that if you feel they're doing the skills the way in which have been explicitly presented. But if they're being wild and doing things that, let's say, large sticks climbing up a slide is probably not a safe thing and is not in the presentation, then you turn slide climbing off, and we can't slide climb right now because sticks are coming to slides, right? Like, we have the power as teachers to sort of present this material in a different way if we are bound by regulation to still make it happen. It just takes like some extra
circumventing,
an extra step, right?
How horrible that we have to present. Look, we had a whole PowerPoint on slide climbing last Thursday. And, I salute you for thinking about, like, how do you get around ridiculous rules? And sometimes I think it involves like ridiculous accommodations so that,
yes,
you're fighting sticks with sticks, as it were.
Yeah, and a little bit, I think it is kind of like in the slog of, a lot of regulations aren't up to speed of like what is best for children's mental health or for their physicality, and it's going sometimes in the wrong direction. And so unfortunately, we have to play a little bit of that game, but there are ways to say, like, I'm supposed to say no, but how can I say yes?
Right.
And with that information, show evidence of that.
Okay, that sounds like a solution, or one potential solution to the overregulation problem. I'm going to jump in where Maggie allowed me to jump, which is to explain what LECRO's 2 school programs are. And I'll preface this with they're both free. So that shouldn't be any kind of barrier to entry. So the Let Grow Play Club, the one that we've been talking about, is where schools stay open before or after school for mixed age, no devices, free play with the adult there. And we did, one school that was doing a play club did a survey, and somewhere we have the little graph if you want to show it for a second. But the after school programs, you could do soccer, you could do chess, you could do music, you could do singing, you could do blah, 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 blah. And if you show the graph, I think it speaks for itself. When they ask the kids, what would you like to do? Guess what that green one is, right? So we didn't name all the other ones because then the school would recognize itself, but kids are desperate for free play. And especially these young ones. I mean, the fact that lifting the giant log was like the highlight of their year just shows how fulfilling it is. And it's like, that woman was just, you can get rid of the graph for a second. The woman who said that, like, who was it? Emma, I think, was just saying now how, boy, you let the kids have, some fabric, and then they made swings and they had a great time. It's like, wow, it's like I put food in front of, children and they ate it. It's like putting something that they're designed to want, right? Mother Nature made, I don't know if Mother Nature, genes, whatever it is, something has made children of all species want to play. And the fact that they don't get many opportunities of it, and then they all look like they're turning their heads towards the sun and blossoming when they do, when they're carrying the stick or making the swing or creating a carnival, should be evidence to us that they're missing something. It's like the body needs thiamine. It's like we got to give it back to them. So the Play Club, if you go to letgrow.org, and I'm sure there'll be some email sent out after this, letgrow.org, and you click on school programs, there's a drop-down menu, and one thing is the Play Club, and all our materials are there. And, to a certain extent, they're silly for the same reason, like Claire was talking about. Like you can figure out how to run a play club, but there it is. So it looks like it's a legitimate, instructions and a letter for parents and a little thing that the kids sign that say, I can't deliberately hurt anyone or leave without telling anyone. So anyways, highly recommend the Play Club. And then the other Let Grow initiative for schools, and let's say preschools, is the Let Grow project. This is yet another idea I stole. This was from a 6th grade teacher in Manhattan, Joanna Drusen, who read the story about Izzy taking the subway alone. And she thought, well, my kids are 6th graders. It's first year of middle school. They're ready for a little independence too. And so she sent them with the homework assignment to go home and do something new on your own that you feel ready to do, because now you're whatever the age, we're 10. And then she had me come in and listen to the kids as they presented their projects. They showed a video, or they wrote a little poem or an essay. And it's been so interesting because one kid took her dog to the vet, and that was great. And one kid, a bunch of kids made food, and a bunch of kids made eggs, and they were so scared that I thought she had taught them bad writing. Like, you should make your writing really dramatic. Because I thought I was going to burn down the house, or I was really worried I was going to hurt myself. And I'm like, you're making eggs. I approached the open flame. It's like, I doubt it. You're living in Manhattan. But they had done so little and been allowed to do so little that it was a chance for them to be independent, and for their parents to be sort of forced to step back to see just how much they could do. And I'll tell you, trying to decide which story to tell you. All right, I'll tell you this one story. So boy, this was when it began. So it was already 12 years ago or something like that. Decided he would pick up his little brother from school. And so he got on a bus, it's New York City, to go to the kid's school. And it's like looking around, and nothing is familiar, and it's getting further and further. And he said he was finally so scared, he was practically screaming at the bus driver. Felt like he was about to cry. And he's like, where am I? Where am I? And the bus driver said, where do you want to go? And he showed him the address. He said, oh, you have to go downtown, but you got on the uptown bus. So here's a transfer. This is the days of transfer. You just take this over to the other side, a block away, go downtown, you'll be fine. And so the boy's telling it, and everyone in the school sort of laughing at him. Oh, you were so scared. You were practically crying in public. You went the wrong way. And he said, yeah. And then he pulled out his wallet and he said, and here's the transfer. And I said, why do you carry that? That was a bad day for you. And he didn't really have an answer, but the answer is because that's his golden ticket. He could screw up and things were going to be okay. He got on wheels. Maggie and he went the wrong way and things still turned out okay. And that's the anxiety breaker, right? Anxiety is thinking that something will go wrong and you won't be able to handle it and you'll be hurt forever. And here he was, and something went wrong and he was fine. And that's a lot of wind beneath kids' wings. Now we're talking about preschoolers. What can they do? So much around the house. They can scramble an egg. They can, take care of the pet. They can do something and come in and tell you what they did as a big kid at home. And it's bringing in another element of who they are. Maybe they're not even the best liked kid, or they're having some troubles at school, but they're the one who, took out the trash or helped mom, make the tortillas or wash the dishes. And kids long, this better than me, kids long to be part of the real world, and they long to help. And don't extinguish that, celebrate that, and get parents used to stepping back too, so that they can see that their kid is getting older every year and more competent, and they can trust them. Back to trust. I'm done. That's my little spiel about the Let Grow project. So also go to letgrow.org, click on Let Grow project, and our voluminous materials are there, whether you need them or not. I mean, actually, we'd like to add more. We have one that's I haven't written it. Somebody else wrote it, and I'm not sure what's on it, but it's that there is a whole special Let Grow project for early childhood. And I'm always happy to add things to it. So if you have suggestions or things that you've seen kids thrive on doing, you should let us know. Oh, there they are. Cool. Interesting. I wonder. What's I wonder ... Lisa?
Oh, no, that was something related to a technological piece.
Oh, okay. All right.
Would you like to show the other video, or do you want to move on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other video is going back to the Let Grow Play Club, but it has to do with post-COVID. Everybody is sad about the horrible hit that kids have taken, especially when it comes to being lonely. And so I went and interviewed kids who were in a Let Grow Play Club. And this is 90 seconds of them telling me why they liked it and why it was different from anything else.
Okay, bear with me.
Yeah. Oh, I like those kids so much. Anyways, what does that say to you? Anything? I mean, does that sort of seal the deal for anyone? Or are you already convinced? Maybe you're already convinced. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Maggie because she understands actual child development and has worked in the classroom and can talk more about anything, including how to encourage more independence in kids.
Maggie, shall I pull up the slides?
That would be great. So actually, when I see stuff like this, or when we talk about kids playing, there are a couple of developmental things that do just jump out at me that I think are super fascinating. So I've been researching play for the last, 5 or 6 years. Ooh, there's the videos again.
Just
good music,
right.
Waking you up. But one of the things that really jumps out to me is this concept of, intrinsic motivation. So the image I chose on the background here kind of brings up the opposite in my mind, which is a sticker chart, right? It's something that we're kind of using to get kids to do things. And really, it's all about that external reward, right? I want you to do this, and I'm going to give you a sticker. I want you to behave in this way, and here's your reward. But I think one of the best things and the best feelings that people can have is when you actually want to do something, when you actually feel engaged in an activity for its own sake. And that can lead to actually becoming really competent at something because you're naturally interested in doing it. So rather than feeling a lot of pressure, and maybe that pressure makes you feel shame because maybe you're not meeting those external expectations, when the expectations come from yourself, suddenly you have all the focus you need to do this task. You are, a free agent. You have agency. You're deciding when to stop or when to begin something or when to change something. And it's really a great practice in kind of 2 areas that we talk about a lot in early childhood, which is self-regulation, being able to control yourself, and executive functioning skills, kind of that organization and being able to regulate your emotions, and all things that can be really hot and cold and run different ways in early childhood. And I see all of these things happening when we look or talk about something like Play Club, where it's kids of all different ages and they have open-ended materials and they're able to engage and interact with each other kind of their own free will. And obviously there's no allowance for dangerous activities or problems of that to come up. But what we see is a more collaborative interaction in this playtime. So for me, I love that, play is enjoyable, play is lighthearted, but that's not really developmentally why I find play to be fascinating. It's really these key points about intrinsic motivation, and then the kind of pillars of development, cognitive, physical, and social emotional areas of development. So we can hop to the next slide, Lisa. So the cognitive benefits of playtime in early childhood, they're really endless. So these are just 2 really simple kind of snapshots of research that I've come across in the past several years that I think are interesting and related to some of that benefit of intrinsic motivated activities of when kids really want to do something on their own terms, is that self-regulation and this executive function. So you can see kind of those wheels turning on that picture in the brain. And for me, when I think of executive function, I always just think of that prefrontal cortex, that front part of our brain, which is really like the secretary of our brains, and kind of helping us decide when to start and stop, when I'm going to let Lenore talk, or someone else is going to jump in. And those are skills that are really yet to be refined in early childhood. So when we give kiddos opportunities to have free play, they're having this natural exercise in executive functioning. So I have just a couple of research quotes from Shaheen and also from Weiland. And programs with active play components may be more successful in eliciting improved executive function because of the importance of motor learning early on, and because of the social motivation aspects of learning. That's kind of like throwback to the wheels we were all talking about on those roller skates, on those bikes. We're getting physical activity, which is really positive for our development. And we're often doing that with peers or other people and kind of building relationships in the social emotional domain. So it kind of makes sense when you think about child development in this pillar of cognitive physical and social, emotional, like all the things kind of have to be fed nutrients, and
Right.
play actually comes at it with all of these good nutrients to help kids grow. And they're not always going to grow, at the same rates. We know that, especially in ages 3 to 6, there's huge ranges. But when they have that space and time and freedom and play, they can actually really benefit from this. And we can kind of see that in the scientific research. So let's look at the next slide, should be physical. Right. So the physical benefits, the first part's kind of obvious. Like, are you running around? Awesome. Your blood is pumping, your endorphins are high. You're feeling good because you're getting physical exercise. And we know how important it is for kids to have that opportunity to build their fine motor skills, maybe picking up a pencil or painting, but also those big muscles, the gross motor. So having just opportunity and time for kids to figure out, how do I want to move my body in space? Like, what does this feel like? And one of my favorite things to see in early childhood classrooms is there an easel in there? Are kids getting that opportunity to kind of cross over their midline, which is so positive for their brain? Whenever I see kids doing that, taking any, like a toy, throwing a ball, painting at the easel, kind of having to look across, like, this is the type of activity that kids are interested, intrinsically motivated to do, but also developmentally really fantastic for them, because they're going to be lighting up both sides of their brain. So when we cross the midline, it's not just half the brain working, it's both sides of it. And it's like training for reading. That's what I always say. Have kids cross their midline as much as you can, because it's really doing hand-eye coordination. And when we're talking about tracking the text, there's so many things that come into that when we're doing reading instruction with young kids, and not all children are really ready for that. It could be something even as small as the little muscle behind your eyeball is not quite strong enough to actually track text. But maybe if kids had more opportunity to have free time and free play, they would have naturally trained their bodies through being motivated to do playful activities that they wanted to do. Maybe they would be ready. So having that opportunity to run, jump, talk about whatever they want to talk about, it can all kind of lead towards a really healthy and strong individual on all the different levels. And the final one would be social emotional development. So I think the nice and like warm and cozy feelings we feel about when we think about playtime and maybe our childhood, it's the relationships. I keep talking about relationships. I feel like I always do that with early childhood, but it's so important for children to feel connected to their teacher and to their families, and to have that like sense of self. And that feeds into something that I think is really, really critical for everybody, which is self-efficacy, like actually feeling like you can do things and you can do things well, and you can have persistence and you can problem solve. And that also is something that really can happen organically when kids have the opportunity to be playing freely. So that leads me to a lot of what I've been hearing tonight, and a lot that mirrors my own experience when I was in the classroom, feeling like I wanted more play time, or feeling like I should be creating certain opportunities for kids. But I've come across an area of research about family social capital, which really is, in short, that we can do all the things we want to do in our classroom, but the biggest influence and the most important influence is that of the family on the child. So it has more bearing, the relationship that the children have with their families, than even the quality of their school on the long-term life outcomes for young children. So I think what's important for us as educators of young children or working within this field is that we are public servants in the sense that we're working with children, but we're also working with families. So I think there's an opportunity here not to tell parents what to do ever, but to share good information, because everyone should have access to good information. So I think talking about how critical it is for parents to have, a positive relationship, even if it's like being playful with their kids for 5 minutes, or giving them that extra half an hour at the park when they can, or just having set unstructured time where kids can decompress and think about it, or, you know, setting up an area in their house where there is an easel or some open-ended play activities. You know, we don't always want to have kids playing with toys that have all the work done for them. You know, it's great to let parents know plain blocks are great and accessible and wonderful. And then the kids get to do all the work with their imagination. And it also can improve parental self-efficacy, which is even more important. So we have children who can have improved self-efficacy just by doing free play, but parental self-efficacy can have a snowball effect. So if the parent feels like they're doing a really good job parenting their kids, then it's going to kind of snowball into this positive interaction with their kids having more good feelings, and, you know, just kind of letting go of the pressure of having such a scheduled, set out, rigid day or week or year set up for them. Like the gift of some free time and some free play, I think, is something as educators could be a topic for family night, could be a recommendation if children are really struggling with mental health or stress. You know, in particular, after the pandemic, a lot of people were really, with the isolation and the fear of everything that was going on in the world, were very, you know, having a lot of issues with that. And so I love when the answer can be something simple, like maybe you could do less, maybe you could make things simple. And I think in the spirit of what can we do if we're working in a context where things feel, you know, constrained, we can talk about, hey, we have all the freedom we want to do. We can use simple materials. We can have positive interactions with our kids. And that actually will really, really help them for like long-term life outcomes.
Right on.
So that's the perfect segue into a small group opportunity. And I'll stop sharing my screen in a moment, but let's just rest our eyes on this gorgeous image and think about, you know, what are some ways that we can encourage and or create opportunities for children to have greater agency or control over their lives and play more, whatever that means in your respective setting. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Lisa, how
I'm
long
glad
would
you've
you like
learned
to-
how to share.
It took a while.
It's important.
How long will the breakout rooms be?
What do you think? 10 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, I've opened breakout rooms for everyone, and you can join them.
Click join.
Great.
Thank you.
Marianne, I lost my little invite thing. Is there a way to send it again?
I will.
Thanks, sorry.
there was one comment that was being made in mine, and now I'm Mr. Jennifer, about kids who have been home and on screens and what it's like to have them in the class now. And I just wanted to hear what she was saying. So Jennifer, you were saying that the kids are almost like engaging in parallel play, but they're not on screens. So what is it that they're doing?
So my observation was about how children are almost interacting with each other at like a superficial level. And I'm attributing it to, and this is like the negative Nelly about me, so I apologize in advance, but I'm seeing it as almost like a parent who's on a phone and answering, or I don't know, just a minute, right? That's the kind of like when I'm trying to engage with a child in imaginative play, they're either very literally telling me that, no, that's an acorn, right? Where they've lined it up. And I think, oh, I have all these great ideas. I'm already imagining a story about what you've set here. What are you imagining? And, you know, that kind of thing. But then also just the, you know, I'm more excited about their play than they are. And it's almost like, okay, lady, kind of not wanting to engage with me and just kind of, you know, and not really even glancing at me sideways, that kind of thing. That's what I was talking about, because I think the question in our group was about the impact of wearing masks throughout the pandemic. And for me, I didn't see directly an impact of wearing masks, but it was more the decrease in the social interactions. That's the impact I'm seeing in classrooms.
Wow. Okay. All right. So is there something, I don't know, there's something that you're thinking about now with all the it sounds like maybe Lesely College is always preaching the importance of play. And this is, you know, sort of another cheering session for it. But I'm wondering if there is anything that you got out of today that you're thinking, oh, I can incorporate that, or, oh, that's something I hadn't thought about. Because for me to go around telling other people about it and trying to get them on board, I need to know what gets actual educators excited about this. So tell me if there's anything that's like sort of like made you think, oh, everybody will understand that. If you had anything. No?
Maybe just throughout the whole night, maybe more like how you guys said, everything kind of comes back to trust. And I know with my classroom, especially the last like 2 or 3 years, we really tried to foster like a sense of community because our kids are older and we give them a lot more responsibility in the room. And we find that they really flourish with something like that. And also touching on, like, I know we touched on risk while playing, and it kind of just all circles around back to trusting, the trust between the teacher and the child. And I feel like with me and my co-teacher, that's one of our strengths. It's just something that we really understand our kids. And I think we're just trying to bridge that gap, like with the parents and understanding, you know, the trust we have between them and how throughout the day we can really flow and give the kids more space to do something they've never done. So when we hear parents say, oh, wow, they're not like that at home. And, you know, it kind of gets you thinking like, okay, well, you know, what responsibilities do they have and what kind of trust do you guys have between each other? So that's just something I'm thinking about more so than I have in a while, I would say. Cool.
Okay. Anyone else, or should I be looking at this thing? Keep the conversation going. Yes. Be relentless. Yes. Relentless on the idea that this isn't silly, that kids are built to play, that they're learning when they don't look like they're doing a lesson, that, you know, it's all about calculating and communicating. The minute anybody says, you know, help me, I thought even in the reimagining play recess video, when you see this kid just like pushing the other kid up the, I don't know why I find that so important or moving, but it's like, you know, we keep thinking of kids as like little dullards who need to be filled or little bullies who need to be stopped. And really the impulse is to like, oh my God, here's my friend, you know, not wham, not who cares. They're engaged and they want to be part of the world. And our job is to not cauterize that curiosity and that warmth and that love they have for the world and for their friends and for their teachers and for their parents, and not to turn it all into some boring didactic lesson, because kids have been around for a lot longer than school, and they all seem to learn how to, get along and survive. And to a certain extent, we have to stand in awe of what happens when we give them some of that time.
Lenore, something that's been on
I'm
my
looking for
mind.
who's talking. Oh, there you are. Hi,
Erica.
Yes.
Something that's been on my mind throughout the presentation, and really Lisa opened with this to talk about the difficulties of the last several years, the loss, the loneliness, really the trauma of it. So one of the things that research on trauma shows is that somebody who has lived through traumatic experiences is actually predisposed to think the worst of a situation. So there's actually, we respond differently based on trauma history. So I'm wondering how we think about that in relation to parents, caregivers, children, and recognize that that's real. So that fear, that reaction, that leap to think the worst is something there. So how do we acknowledge and at the same time advocate for space for risk-taking for kids?
Couple things. Yeah, that's a neat question. First of all, I think we can't keep calling it risk-taking. Risk-taking sounds horrible. Let's call it playing and exploring and growing and thriving, because the whole idea of risk, the word risk is bad. And I know you don't mean like risk, like I'm going to run across the train track right before the train comes, but that's sort of the way that word, resonates for people. So, there's something about our vocabulary that we have. I haven't come up with it, but maybe you'll come up with it, some other way of explaining that this is, so many things that aren't really risky have been redefined as risky in our risk-averse culture, including, waiting at the bus stop for 3 minutes when you're 7 by yourself. So there's something that's already over the top about our sense of risk. And then I've been talking about this for so long, and the only thing that I've seen that sort of de-traumatizes, de-anxiety-ifies people is an encounter with reality. Because what you're talking about is this negative thinking, this what I call worst first thinking. I was trying to come up with an opposite of stranger danger. Worst, like calling the worst case scenario first and proceeding as if it's likely to happen, is sort of, it was happening a lot before COVID too. Why would you let your kid walk to school? What if they were kidnapped, sort of thing. And the thing that reprograms the brain, like literally reprograms, like makes different lines in the brain, is having an experience that's the opposite. And that's why I highly recommend the Let Grow Project, because it really is if you think like, I couldn't let my kid walk 2 blocks to the bus stop because what if, until you do it, then you do it. You're forced to do it. You're shoved into a little bit of growth by your school because you've been worried about your kid's social emotional growth. They say, try the Let Grow Project. You're going to be surprised. You do it for the kid. But what's amazing is then the kid comes back and they're excited and they did something by themselves and they met the local dog and they fed a squirrel and they picked these leaves for you. And mom, what's this yucky bug? That's a lantern bug. Kill it. Any of those things are so exciting to you because they have become a different person and you're so proud of them that the pride replaces the fear. It's only like my talking about this endlessly and giving you statistics. None of that matters. It's seeing your kids succeed at something that you thought they were too young to do, or it was too soon. And then they do it. And the kid is proud because that's the trust. You trusted them and they did it. And then we're programmed to want, why do you have kids? You have kids so that they'll live when you're off the Zoom call, right? And so you don't have any proof that they're going to be okay until they do something without you. And then it changes everything because you are programmed to want that to happen and to see it happen. And I did a television show, and you can look it up. It's called World's Worst Mom, where I sat with the craziest parents in America and Canada, and who wouldn't let their kids do anything, like not ride a bike, not eat food without the mother shoving it in his mouth. He's 10. Mom takes the kid to the bathroom, a girl who's also 10, and sits in the stall with her because she doesn't want anybody to catch her. So a lot of very, very anxious parents pre-COVID, long pre-COVID, it's like 10 years ago. And then I sit with them and we send the kid out to, run an errand or climb a tree or ride a bike. And then when the kid comes home, you'd think that the parent had come up with this great idea. Why don't I have my kid to have more freedom? They're going to be so great. And they can't remember why they were so afraid. They literally, at the beginning, we would write this list of like, can't walk to school, can't climb a tree, can't go on an overnight, whatever. And then they look at the list again and they're like up from a coma. They don't remember who wrote that or why. And it's that effective. And if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't spend 15 years promoting it. But seeing how easy it is to really help people de-traumatize and welcome them back to the real world and their real child is way faster and cheaper and simpler than you would ever think. And so reality is the only antidote that I've seen to inflated fears.
It also brings up the concept of like risk versus hazard, right?
Oh, that's right.
It is hazardous to run in front of a train on the train tracks because you will almost certainly get really hurt. Or it's hazardous if, kids are walking around rusty nails. Like that's inherently hazardous. It's risky to go up the slide at a playground, right? Or it's risky to maybe stack the blocks higher than the height of the child because it could fall down. Like risk means there's a potential for something to go wrong, whereas hazard means it's almost certain that something could go wrong. And that was something that I used to talk about with colleagues a lot, like about blocks. Like how high should we let the kids build the blocks? Because like, where do we cross over from it's risky and it might fall over on them, or, hey, this is a hazard and, the kids are going to get hurt and we don't want anybody to get, hit in the head with a block and have to go to the nurse. And then there's an incident report. People are going to come down to your classroom and wonder what is going on with the blocks, right? So it's that line of trying to figure out. And I think having the conversation like, well, what do we really think about letting the kids use the monkey bars? What do we really think about like playing tag? I've been to lots of schools in the last decade where tag is banned. They're not allowed to play tag because it becomes too out of control, which is the fascinating phenomenon in itself, that kids are not allowed to play tag. And, what does that mean for their ability to play games at recess? It's kind of limiting.
Kind of.
So I think, it's an interesting thing when we talk about that. And I think, again, in terms of an advocacy point or a sharing information with families point, they should, come to you if they're concerned. Hey, I'm concerned about the block play. And you could talk to them about, it's true, there could be a risk to happen, but like the benefits might outweigh the risk is something that sometimes I think about. Like, if I stop this child from trying this right now, might they not try this ever again? Or might they not have the courage to have that internal motivation to do this and then build up on their self-efficacy? It's like this whole kind of trajectory of what might occur if we kind of stifle children in their play. So I'm completely against hazardous play, but I am not against risky play as long as, it's reasonable. So I think just those words are kind of important to kind of unpack.
Tell them you're anti-hazard play. That should help.
I am against hazards.
Yeah, yes, no, I'm saying Erica can maybe tell them too. It's like, I'm not endorsing something dangerous. I'm endorsing something like that's developmentally rich and normal. Right?
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think I'm thinking of the complexity of it. I think there's so many, beautiful and important layers to this conversation. But when I think about the concept of trauma that impacts how people perceive the safety of a situation, I also think about, the racism, the bias, the microaggressions that are so much a part of our daily life in our society, and what impact do they have on caregivers' trust in a situation, and many other layers to that. So I'm just thinking about all of the different factors at play, socio-cultural at play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to just second what Erica is saying, I know that when I'm teaching teachers, they reflect on a lot of different kinds of play that are safe for different settings. So one of my students was saying, I was talking about stick play on the playground, and she was talking about how for her boys, particularly the Black boys in her classrooms, she really worked with them to not engage in play that looked violent, because for them that wasn't safe, because they were perceived in a different way because of the racism that's prevalent in our society. So I think when we're thinking about all of these things, I still wonder about who has access, for whom is this safe, and for whom is it not safe, and why, and how does bias shape what's available and what feels safe when we're supporting the children in our classrooms.
Cool. Makes sense. All right. I can't remember if this was till 6:15 or 6:30. So you tell me.
It's 6:30, and I wonder, Erica, I know there are some announcements and slides to share, I believe.
Yeah, do we want to welcome any further questions from the audience, or do we want to go right on to the slides?
Let's see if there's questions, and if not, we'll go on to slides. Going once, going twice. Nice chance. You can also always write to me. I'll probably write back to you because I probably have more questions for you, but it's Lenore, Lenore @letgrow.org. So.
And we really want to thank you, Lenore and Maggie and Lisa, for organizing this beautiful conversation. And you're absolutely right that you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, no, I was like, there's something funny about this group. Everybody doesn't think I'm crazy, right? Yeah, how great. I'm so glad you guys are out there training teachers. I mean, that's like, go forth and train them all. It'd be lovely if they all came to you and heard this kind of just sort of common sense and curiosity about the kids and trust. Be great.
Yeah.
Go, Leslie.
In the spirit of that, we would like to let you know that we are planning one more innovations workshop this year. It will take place in early winter, early spring. We have to look forward to spring here, don't we, already, as we just approach the...
So dark.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it will focus on comparative perspectives on the child in nature, again, in keeping with our focus on the whole child. And then I would also just like to raise awareness, as Lisa said, she is our chair of our undergraduate education programs, and I'm counterpart as program director in the graduate school. We have licensure programs, we have professional programs, we have a certificate in innovative pedagogies that is really a deep dive into play-based approaches. And as part of that offering, we have 2 courses coming up this spring. And they are Innovative Pedagogies in Early Childhood Education and Environment and Materials. Both are being offered in weekend intensive format. They can be taken either as 3-credit courses or for a lesser fee for professional development experiences. So if you have any interest in these offerings, please be sure to reach out for us. And we're so grateful that you spent time with us tonight, and look forward to seeing you at the next workshop.
Hey, listen, thank you for having me. And I really appreciate, I've talked to Maggie and Lisa for a couple of years now, and I appreciate their wisdom. So thank you, ladies.
More to come.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'd just like to add for everybody that by the end of the week, hopefully, I'll be sending you a certificate of participation and a link to the YouTube station that will hold this recording and all the other recordings in this series from the last couple of years, which is a great resource.
Thank you.
And I put both my email and Lenore's email in the chat. So please feel free anytime to email us and chat with us about play and childhood independence. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Cool. All right, go eat dinner.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you, Dane.
Hey, Mary, it's good to see you. Oh, I missed her. I wasn't in time. So we have 2 really successful multiple ones in a row. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I saved the chat and I'll send it to you guys in case you want to do anything with it.
You guys were fantastic. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Really good.
Oh, you're welcome.
Fun.
Yeah.
We do need a bigger audience, though. We got to figure that out.
Well, I mean, I think it's true. I mean, last year during COVID, we had up to 80 people, a couple of times.